Thank you very much. My name is Marianne Carlsen. I am the chair of the subsidiary body for implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the 9th Durban Forum, bringing together parties, representatives of the constituted bodies, experts, and practitioners from across the world. We should have been in Bonn now, working together to move the climate agenda forward. We are not. Instead, we are in our homes under very particular circumstances, and for many of you, your attention might be first and foremost with your family and friends. I hope you are all safe and healthy. Nevertheless, while COVID-19 rightfully takes our immediate attention, we must keep up momentum, continue working to address the urgency of climate ambition and action that was already there long before the pandemic. 2020 remains a key year for climate. We are meeting today in the only setting we can. I know that for many of you, you are struggling with connectivity and time zone differences. Technical improvements have already been made, and we are also trying to find that sweet spot where we can reach most of you within your waking hours. But I recognize challenges do remain. So a particularly warm welcome to those of you who are joining here today under somewhat difficult circumstances. The theme of this year's Durban Forum is capacity building to support the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement, ensuring coherence and coordination of action and support. The Paris Agreement provides an opportunity for countries to adopt enhanced strategic and sustainable approaches to the transition to a climate neutral and climate resilient future, a future we all want. In fact, the Paris Agreement requires the participation of all. For that to become a reality and for all countries to be included and to harvest the benefits of that global transition, capacity building is crucial. And therefore, capacity building is a fundamental building block of the Paris Agreement. And when developing the necessary and appropriate transitional approaches, we need to know where we are, what we are doing, and most importantly, what needs to be done. The enhanced transparency framework provides the guidance and tools for finding answers to these questions. Transparency is therefore a backbone of climate ambition, action, and support, and for the achievement of the Paris goals. As highlighted by Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, you cannot enhance ambition and action without building capacities. At the same time, ambition and action cannot be robust without a transparency system. And for that, capacity building is imperative. So there is a strong interconnection between capacity building and the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework. 2020 is the year that all parties to the Paris Agreement will communicate or update new NDCs. The first reports are due in 2024, and that is also the same time when parties are well ahead in developing the NDCs that will be communicated in 2025. And this is near future, and strengthening capacity building is urgent. And this is why the 9th Durban Forum aims to address the need to enhance coordination and coherence of capacity building support in assisting developing countries to transit to the enhanced transparency framework, building on the experiences and lessons learned from the implementation of the existing MRV system. As many of you might know, the existing MRV system involves the preparation of various national reports followed by the international consultation and analysis process. The consultative group of experts plays a key role in providing technical and capacity building support to developing countries to help them prepare national reports and facilitate the efforts to transit to the enhanced transparency framework. So it is therefore a privilege for me, before I proceed to introduce the topics for today's discussions, to give the floor to the chair of the consultative group of experts, Arif Goher, to say a few words. Arif, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariana, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the consultative group of experts at the 9th Durban Forum. The focus of this year's Durban Forum is very timely. Very soon, developing country parties will start submitting their biennial transparency reports under the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement. As many of you are aware, the reporting requirements for developing countries have enhanced under the enhanced transparency framework, which also means that there are additional capacity needs for developing countries to be addressed. However, as the enhanced transparency framework builds on the arrangements under the convention, there are several experiences and lessons learned in supporting the MRV arrangements that offer insights to support developing countries to build their capacities. For the last 20 years, the CGE has worked with developing country parties to prepare their national communications, biennial update reports, and build sustainable reporting systems. The CGE has provided technical support catered to the needs of the developing country parties. This has been done through targeted surveys at the national level, discussions during the hands-on training workshops, and feedback directly received from experts to understand their capacity building requirements. Further, the CGE has successfully prepared the CGE training program for teams of technical experts conducting technical analysis of biennial update reports, with the process being a key element of the existing MRV system to help parties identify their capacity building requirements in reporting. Last year, the CGE prepared a technical paper on the problems and constraints, lessons learned, and capacity building needs identified in respect of the process and preparation of national communications and biennial update reports of developing country parties. This paper also addressed the awareness and preparedness for the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework. My colleague Elisa will later provide some key insights from this presentation, so I will not go further on this matter. I would urge you to look at this paper to understand the current situation faced by the developing country parties. In addition, another CGE member, Mr. Damiano, will be moderating the breakout group, one on the implications of the relevant MPGs adopted in Katowice for developing countries in terms of building or strengthening capacity. Let me end by encouraging the participants to engage constructively in this discussion and provide their insights on their experiences from participating in the existing MRV arrangements under the convention and identifying their needs as they prepare for the enhanced transparency framework. We are at a critical junction as the technical support being provided needs to be adequate to deliver on the requirements of the Paris Agreement. On behalf of the CGE, we look forward to the outcomes of these discussions in order to ensure that the technical support it continues to provide are aligned with the needs of developing country parties. Thank you, Mariana, and thank you all.
Thank you, Arif, for your well-placed remarks, and also to the CGE for the support you extend to developing countries in this matter. Let me now turn to the topics for today. The Durban Forum will focus on the... Sorry, I have echo sound in my... Thank you. Sorry, I will repeat a little. Now let me turn to the topics for today. The forum will focus on the following 4 subtopics. Implications of the relevant MPGs adopted in Katowice for developing countries in terms of building or strengthening capacity, needs and gaps. Lessons learned in relation to both actions taken and support received in developing countries as regards capacity building for MRV that could be useful in implementing the enhanced transparency framework. Thirdly, assessing and improving the effectiveness of capacity building action. And last, promoting and improving coherence and coordination of capacity building action at the national and international level to enhance support for implementing the enhanced transparency framework. I would like to highlight that the organization of this year's meeting took into consideration the request by the COP to align the theme of the forum with the focus area of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, the PCCB. The outcomes of this forum are therefore expected to feed in and inform the work of the PCCB. Our co-facilitators will share the outcomes from this meeting at the 4th meeting of the PCCB, which will take place on the 22nd to 25th of June. The PCCB will then take stock of these outcomes to assist them in identifying concrete action points and recommendations to the COP on issues relevant to the topics addressed here today. Our co-facilitators of the forum today are most experienced in the matters at hand. Please allow me to introduce them. Our first facilitator is Edith Ofwona Adera, which is currently a climate change senior program specialist at the African Development Bank. She also led a discussion at the 8th Durban Forum last year. Our second facilitator is Roberta Ianna, who is a senior advisor at the Italian Ministry for the Environment, Land and Sea. Roberta is currently a member of the PCCB. I strongly believe that we are in very capable hands of Edith and Roberta. I also thank the Secretariat for their able support in getting the forum underway under these very particular circumstances. I am confident that despite its format, the 9th meeting of the Durban Forum will contribute to an open, productive and enlightening exchange of experiences and lessons learned among parties and non-party stakeholders. I wish you all the best and thank you for joining. Edith, Roberta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon or good morning or good evening to everyone who joined today the Durban Forum. And on behalf of myself and my co-facilitator, I'd like to thank SPI Chair Marianne Carlsen and Mr. Arif Gohir on the CG for the warm welcome and excellent remarks provided. My co-facilitator and I have decided that we will take turns in leading this discussion. So I will facilitate the first half of this session, while my co-facilitator Edith will take you through the panel and breakout group discussions. So as a co-facilitator of the 9th Durban Forum on Capacity Building, I'd like to welcome you all once more to the forum today. And like I'm sure all of you, I look forward to a lively and productive discussion on the topic of capacity building to support the implementation of an enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement, ensuring coherence and coordination of actions and support. I fully agree with the views expressed by Marianne on the important link between the Durban Forum and the work of the PCCB. As a member of the PCCB, I understand the importance of linking these two, and with this in mind, the sub-teams of this forum have been aligned with the areas of the work of the PCCB to support the implementation of its work plan. The Durban Forum is a place where we get to hear the views of parties and non-party stakeholders, as well as the perspective from capacity building recipients and capacity builders. Key inputs and intervention made by the speaker and the audience today, as Marianne already said, will be captured in a summary report, which will be submitted to the SBI for consideration at its 52nd session. And the outcomes of the Durban Forum will also be presented to the PCCB during its next meeting at the end of this month, to inform, of course, the committee's deliberations. Today's forum is being broadcast live and is being recorded. So the link for the live stream is provided on the Durban Forum webpage. And to enable and manage feedback, questions and comments from participants during the main session, we are using a survey tool called Mentimeter. To access it, please go to the website www.menti.com and input the number 429731. This will allow you to post questions and comments at any time during the main session, including, if you wish, your name and the speaker you would like to address. Following the panel discussion, a selection of these questions will be read out for responses from the presenters. And I think you should see on the screen the website and the information about Mentimeter. So our first main topic to be discussed today, as Marianne introduced already, is implications of the relevant modalities, procedures and guidelines adopted in Katowice for developing countries in terms of strengthening capacity building and their needs and gaps. Our second topic concerns lessons learned in relation to both action taken and support received in developing countries as regards capacity building for MRV that could be useful in implementing the enhanced transparency framework. Our third topic will be assessing and improving the effectiveness of capacity building action. And last but not least, we will look at issues pertaining to promoting and improving coherence and coordination of capacity building action at the national and international level to enhance support for implementing the enhanced transparency framework. Now, let me quickly run you through the structure of today's program. So we will start with a special address to set the scene. Then we move into a panel discussion to delve deeper into the four subtopics of the event. And we will then invite you all to participate in one of the four breakout group discussions. And each breakout group will focus on one of the subtopics I have just mentioned. After their discussions, all groups will report back in plenary. So even if you have only been able to participate in one group, rest assured that you will not miss out the outcomes of the other groups. And the links for joining each of the four breakout groups are displayed in the chat function of Teams and the meeting, and you should also have received an email today with the links there. So without further delay, let's welcome our keynote presenters today. And I would like now to invite the Secretariat team working on transparency to walk us through the enhanced transparency framework, the relevant MPGs and BTR. So Jigme, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Co-Facilitator. Greetings to all who are connected to this session from around the globe. I and my colleague will share this presentation, and by way of quick introduction, I'm Jigme. I lead a team in the Secretariat that is working on the issues relating to support to developing countries on MRV and enhanced transparency framework. My colleague Xu Hong also leads a team in the Secretariat that supports the implementation of the international consultation and analysis process. So it is our pleasure to have opportunity to provide input to the event, to this event, on a very important topic. Due to the time constraint, we will just be able to give touch on a bird's eye view on a topic which is highly technically complex and quite significant in breadth. I have shared my presentation screen. I hope you are able to see the slides. So I will begin by introducing the transparency arrangements under the convention, then move on to the arrangements under the Paris Agreement, and then my colleague Xu Hong will provide a gist of what we have learned so far from the current arrangements in place and how it could potentially benefit going forward with the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with the terminology and around this MRV, but I also see in the list of registration some who may not be in daily touch with the issue. So for the benefit of them, I will do a quick rundown of what exactly constitutes existing MRV arrangement for developing countries. When we talk of MRV for developing countries, in a very simple terms, it essentially means submission of national reports on climate action and support, including greenhouse gas inventories. The exact terminology for these national reports are national communications, which is to be submitted every 4 years, and biennial update reports, that is to be submitted every 2 years. Once a country submits its biennial update report, then it goes through a two-step process of international consultation and analysis. The two-step, the first one is about technical analysis of the BUR by a team of international experts, followed by a peer exchange workshop under the subsidiary body for implementation, which formally is referred to as facilitative sharing of views. At the same time, at the national level, it is very important that countries are able to put in place domestic MRV system that incentivizes engagement, participation of all relevant stakeholders, but at the same time also seeks to be sustainable in long run. Going forward, I think the sustainable dimension is going to be very important. Finally, the existing MRV package also includes a process around RET+, and that is most relevant for those countries that are seeking to obtain result-based payment for RET+ actions. In order to be eligible for result-based payment, the RET+ actions results need to be technically analyzed by a team of international experts. Now, moving on to the Paris Agreement arrangements, and that is for all that applies to all countries that are party to the Paris Agreement. Some of these MRV arrangements under the convention, in particular for developing countries, submission of BUR and ICA process will be replaced by the enhanced transparency framework. In my view, this is one of the most significant developments under the UNFCCC process, simply because through Paris enhanced transparency framework, now it harmonizes transparency mechanism for all parties by putting in place a same set of operating procedures, which we formally refer to as modalities, procedures, and guidelines. However, there is also a full recognition of the fact that countries around the globe have varying degree of capacities, and as a result, the enhanced transparency framework and its operating procedures, the MPGs, provide flexibility to those developing countries that need it in the light of their capacities. In addition, due to their special circumstances, LDCs and SIDS have further discretion. At the same time, there is this, the expectation is that this flexibility will provide space for countries with lower capacity to gradually improve their capacity, and thereby facilitating improved reporting as well as transparency over a period of time. If you look at the enhanced transparency framework from a structural and topical side, it is not fundamentally very different from what we have under the convention. Similar to arrangements under the convention, enhanced transparency framework includes reporting, technical expert review, and facilitative multilateral consideration of process. All these three arrangements we have in a similar format have under convention. In terms of areas of information to be reported, again, it is still centered around climate action support, including inventories. That said, I think it is very important to note that ETF, Enhanced Transparency Framework, introduces enhanced scope and depth of reporting. So it is very logical to assume that countries will need more robust institutional arrangements and higher degree of capacity. The final BURs would be those that are submitted by no later than 31st December 2024. Once a country submits the final BUR, it can then switch to biennial transparency reports under the convention. That switch, in my view, needs to happen in a way that a country is in a position to submit the biennial transparency report at the latest by 31st December 2024, and that I think it's very important. The obligation to submit national communications under the convention remains unchanged. So the next 1 to 2 years will be very critical because it is during that time that the transition from existing MRV arrangements to the enhanced transparency framework will occur. For the transition to happen smoothly, excuse me, it will require right ingredients. Again, what is right ingredients would depend from country to country, but in general, there are common themes that you hear, and this includes political support, stakeholder buy-in, capacity development, access to support, and also finding a cost-effective way of adapting and enhancing what is already existing in the country so that no one needs to start from the scratch and reinvent the wheel. So I will stop here and hand over to Zhu Hong so that she can continue with the narrative. And let me end my short intervention by thanking everyone for your attention, and I wish you a very productive discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Jigme. Could you move to the last slide? Hello, colleagues. It's really very nice to meet you in the virtual space. As just now introduced by Jigme, my name is Xuehong Wang, and I'm leading the team with the support to ICA implementation at the Secretariat. It's quite challenging to give this presentation in 2 to 3 minutes, given the rich experience and lessons learned from the existing MRV. So that's why I thought I'll just highlight I would like just to share with you 3 key messages. So the first key message I would like to share is the existing MRV system and the international consultation and analysis process serve as the basis to transit to ETF. As Jigme just now showed, the existing MRV and the new ETF are not fundamentally different. There are quite a number of similarities. So, which means for many parties, there's no need to start from scratch. Instead, parties can just build on the domestic system that is now in place, which has been established over the past years, and just enhance this system to be ready for reporting under the ETF. The ICA process which is the existing MRV process, actually is a very effective vehicle to help parties strengthen the rigor of the domestic system. Experience shows after the 5 years of ICA implementation, we have received 57 BURs, BUR submitted by 57 parties. This is more than 1/3 of all developing country parties. And from these reports, there is a very visible improvement in reporting over time. The second key message I would like to share here is I would like to highlight the capacity building element that is embedded in the ICA process. At the outset, one of the main objectives of the ICA process is to help parties identify and prioritize capacity building needs. And this in turn helps with better targeting of financial support, technology transfer, and capacity building activities at the national level. The technical analysis of the BUR reports actually it represents this one-to-one capacity building opportunities through the interaction between the technical experts and the parties themselves, and then through the targeted technical advice being provided to the parties through the ICA process. It helps parties build that capacity. So please use the ICA, the existing MRV, effectively to build the capacity to moving forward to the ETF. The last key message I would like to share with you is the ICA process, including both the BUR technical analysis and the multilateral facilitative sharing of views process under the SBI. The process really helps to facilitate mutual learning and knowledge transfer. Experience, in particular through the facilitative sharing of views process, parties, they showcase climate actions and support needed, and also share good practice, experience, and lessons learned. So I would like to conclude by saying that the ICA process really provides a good testing ground and also a training opportunity for developing country parties to move forward to a transit to ETF. So with that, I wish you all the very best, and thank you again for the opportunity to give this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful presentation, Swehong and Jigme. And now we will hear from the CG representatives on needs and gaps in relation to the enhanced transparency framework. So Ms. Alisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Co-Facilitator, and also many thanks to the organizers of the 9th Durban Forum for inviting the CGE to speak at this event. So given the Durban Forum's theme this year of capacity building to support the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework, the CGE would be happy to share our findings of developing country parties' needs and gaps as they make the transition to the ETF. Next slide, please. Yes, so to provide some context, the CGE is a constituted body under the UNFCCC umbrella. So as some of us here may recall, the CGE was renamed and its mandate was extended for 8 years at COP24 until the 31st December 2026 to support the implementation of the ETF. So the CGE's mandate is to help developing country parties improve their capacities to implement existing MRV arrangements under the Convention and the ETF under the Paris Agreement. And we aim to do so in a timely and sustainable manner. So to meet our goal, our work entails providing targeted technical support and advice to developing country parties in a responsive and timely manner to help them implement the existing MRV arrangements and the ETF. And this would of course include providing support and advice on setting up sustainable institutional arrangements and data management systems. So in March this year, the CG had the opportunity to meet and set out our strategic priorities under the new mandate. So we've broken this up into 3 core periods, taking into account our mandate and the evolution of existing MRV arrangements and the ETF. So from now till 2022, the CGE will continue looking into developing countries' gaps and needs and promoting the understanding that developing countries' efforts to enhance their reporting with their national communications and biennial update reports would help them prepare better for reporting under the ETF. And I think this point was also emphasized by Xue Hong earlier. And in addition, the CGE will introduce details of the ETF and facilitate developing countries' transition to the ETF. So with the first biennial transparency report being due in December 2024, the CGE will spend 2022 to 2024 promoting and facilitating the implementation of the ETF, specifically helping developing countries with the preparation of their biennial transparency reports and the continued submission of national communications. And we do hope that by the end of 2024, we can see BTR submissions from all countries. And following this first submission round, the CG will work to collect information on the lessons learned and the good practices, understand the areas of improvement, and look to refine the approaches and tools for providing this technical advice and support. And we will also continue to support the implementation of the ETF to facilitate improved reporting over time and submission of national communications. So part of the CGE's work plan in 2019 included the assessment of existing and emerging constraints, challenges, lessons learned, and capacity building needs of developing country parties in the implementation of existing MRV arrangements and preparing for the ETF. So to get more up-to-date feedback from developing countries on these MRV and transparency gaps and needs, the CGE conducted an online survey between May and July 2019. For the next 2 slides, I'll be sharing the highlights of the survey results, which represent the views of the 86 developing country parties that responded to the survey. So when asked about the level of understanding of the modalities, procedures, and guidelines, which we had shared a little bit earlier, more than half of the represented parties were somewhat familiar but could use more guidance and information on identifying needs. And only 24% had the knowledge and understanding to start preparing for the ETF, while the others had limited knowledge. At the time of this survey, less than half of the represented parties have begun planning for the transition to the ETF, but we do hope that this figure has grown since last year. Now, to better understand specific needs and capacity building gaps, the CG also asked respondents on the areas of capacity building that they thought their countries would benefit the most from to prepare the ETF. So the most frequently selected area was the methods or practical guidelines for tracking the progress of implementing and achieving NDCs, followed by understanding the link between MRV and transparency of climate action support with the tracking of SDG indicators. formalizing data collection and management, the use of 2006 IPCC guidelines for national greenhouse gas inventories, and understanding the link between current MRV arrangements and the ETF were moderately popular as areas of capacity building among the respondents too. So based on these survey results, the preliminary analysis revealed that the key areas of capacity building needs in preparing for and transitioning to the ETF can be categorized as three broad themes. So first is enhancing the knowledge in the MPGs for the Enhanced Transparency Framework. Second is to enhance knowledge and technical capacity around the methodologies and tools, especially those useful for tracking progress for implementation and achievement of NDCs, the transition from the revised 1996 IPCC guidelines to the 2006 IPCC guidelines, and understanding the areas of enhancement of the ETF vis-a-vis the existing MRV arrangements and how to best address them. And finally, of course, enhancing the data collection and management process through formalizing or standardization, and also exploring opportunities for synergies in the data collection process for reporting on the existing MRV arrangements and the ETF and other international instruments, such as the tracking and monitoring of SDG indicators. And if you are interested to look at all the results of the survey, as said by our CGE chair earlier, you are most welcome to look at the CGE's technical paper on this topic, which was released last October and is available on the UNFCCC webpage. CGE looks forward to working with everyone to support developing countries' transition to the ETF, and we welcome everyone here to visit the CGE's website for more details of our work and our upcoming events. I wish everyone a productive session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alisa. And in order to save time, questions on the special address will be answered together with the questions for our panelists later. However, do add them to the Mentimeter survey whenever they occur to you, and they will be received and considered. So now I would like to hand over the facilitation to Edith. Edith, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberta. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, colleagues, wherever you are. Welcome to the second part of the program, where we will start with a panel discussion. Allow me to introduce the panelists we have. We have 5 panelists today, and I have the pleasure of introducing the first panelist. I'd like to introduce Clifford Malhang. Clifford is a representative of the Small Island Developing States negotiating group. He served in the meteorological services of Jamaica for 35 years and was Jamaica's lead climate negotiators for 20 years. He's a co-chair of Adaptation Committee, was a co-chair in 2017 and chair of CDM Executive Board, and as well a project manager of Jamaica's 3 national communication. Welcome, Clifford, to the panel. My second panelist is Sandra Neby. Sandra works with the National Department of Environment Affairs of South Africa, Deputy Director responsible for coordination, development and publication of South Africa's international climate change reports. That's the biannual update reports, the national communication, as well as the national greenhouse gas inventory reports. Welcome, Sandra, to the panel. My third panelist, I've got the pleasure of introducing Juliet Mary-Edith. Juliet represents the government of the United Kingdom, of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of the COP26 presidency. She leads on a number of support matters under the UNFCCC, including capacity building and transparency of support. She's involved in UK ICF programming for capacity building. Welcome, Juliet. My fourth panelist is Damiano Bogogno. I hope I'm pronouncing your name well. Damiano is a coordinator of UNDP, UNEP Global Support Program, which provides support to more than 140 developing countries in preparing their national nations, their biannual update reports, as well as identifying priority areas for implementing NDCs. He's currently serving as a member of the consultative group of experts. I welcome Damiano to the panel. My last panelist, but not the least, is Fabian Clem. Fabian is the component manager, transparency of IKI support project for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So welcome the 5 panelists. What we will do is that we will start with a first round of questions, and each panelist will have 5 minutes. So I will start with Clifford. Clifford, this is a question we would like you to address. What could be done and by whom to assess and improve the effectiveness of capacity building support and action? Thank you very much. Over to you, Clifford. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's really a pleasure to be joining you here from Jamaica. It's morning in Jamaica, but I know it's different in the other time zones. So let me just begin by saying good day to everyone. I'm the coordinator for the Alliance of Small Island States, the negotiating group for the SIDS on capacity building. So I've been involved with this topic for a little while now, including the historic Paris Agreement, which we were able to successfully have established the Paris Capacity Building Committee. And it has been working quite well. It was reviewed in Madrid, and there is a good decision on moving forward with respect to the committee. I want to thank the organizers of this virtual workshop for inviting me to present on an issue that I'm very dear to, close to my heart. We can't implement anything under this convention, agreement, protocol without the requisite capacities to do that. In particularly the reporting obligations for all parties, particularly developing country parties, and in my case, the small island developing states, unless we are able to have persons who can understand the guidelines, know what are the requirements, and able to now put together the reports. An important part of doing that is to be fully cognizant and aware of the national circumstances of each country. And this is where the SIDS and the LDCs to some extent, and other developing countries, but mainly the SIDS and the LDCs are somewhat at a disadvantage in that we have to rely, and this is based on the past experience with respect to the other reporting requirements, in many instances, overseas consultants. We know the issues that come with those works. You get good products, mind you, in most cases, but the capacities of the countries, the parties, is what in many instances does not get the real attention that it deserves. And so there has been in the past this strong reliance on using outside expertise to do the activities that are required. This is changing, and it has to change. It has been changing over time as the countries that I mentioned, SIDS and the LDCs, have been able to, through several initiatives, improve the capacities of their population, their constituents. And so there's a transition, but it is not happening at a pace that we can say that we are very comfortable with. And so the reporting for the ETF, the Enhanced Transparency Framework, and this link with capacity building now gives us a golden opportunity, in my estimation, to address some of those critical issues with respect to really improving the capacities of countries. For my mind, and anyone who knows me, capacity building for me, in the long term, is to have the relevant subjects, topics integrated into our schools and universities. So we to have climate change in general, overall, as part of the general curriculum of the academic institutions, and in this case, the requirements for completing an enhanced transparency report. So that is where I would want to go. My thinking is that we will have to think of developing, and already I want to thank the previous presenters, and particularly what is happening with the CG, because the CG has been involved in the other reporting of the NAT comes for sure in the next one countries. And we have to see how we can now develop a comprehensive work program targeting SIDS and LDCs who are at the forefront of the needs with respect to capacity development. A 5-year program, for example, that can look at identifying where the gaps are, where the needs are, where parties will need to get assistance to address, and then to see how we can have that with the aim and objective. I want to have it now filtered into the school curriculum. But that takes a lot of planning. It's going to take a lot of effort, and I know we have strong teams in the secretariat and within parties and within our observers and international organizations, that if anything we put our mind to, I know we can achieve. We have done great achievement over the past 25 years, for example. We have tried that a little bit here in Jamaica, and I know in other SIDS in the Pacific to get climate change into the curriculum, but we have made some efforts. Some have been quite successful, but a lot more needs to be done. One of the critical areas is the availability of resource material. And this, I think, is something that is best addressed at the multilateral level for real success. But that means, when I say at the level of the UNFCCC, it means that it will have the involvement of everyone: private sector, public sector, parties, international organizations, regional organizations. To come up with a comprehensive plan. That's really my dream, and really that is something that I would really want to see happening. And the CG, I think, and the PCCD will have a leading role to play with respect to this. Thank you so much, Madam, for your time.
Thank you very much, Clifford, for raising the pertinent issues that you have. I think two of the issues that I've picked from your discussion is the importance of ensuring that there's understanding of the guidelines. And I think from the presentation of the CGE, we actually saw that from the needs assessment, that 50% say that they would like to get a better understanding of the guidelines. And I think the second takeaway from your point is about building local capacity and integrating that into the curriculum and looking at long-term capacity building. So thank you very much, Clifford. I would like to now proceed to our second panelist, and I'd like to invite Sandra. Sandra, welcome, and please address this question. What major lessons have we learned from the MRV, including from the international consultative and analysis process, that could benefit implementation of the enhanced transparency framework? So over to you, Sandra, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. My name is Sandra. As I've already been introduced, I work for the National Department of Environmental Affairs. Now it's called Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. So I'm just going to talk about the major lessons from the MRV process, as well as the benefits that we as South Africa have experienced from the ICA process, and how that has helped us prepare ourselves for the enhanced transparency framework. I think one of the biggest lessons really is to start very early in the process and to set up domestic systems. You need to really have your institutional arrangements in place. I'll just make a few examples from the South African case. As South Africa, we have already submitted 3 biennial update reports, as well as the national communications, and 6 national inventory reports. With our second inventory report, we started using 2000 as the base year, and we shifted from using the 1996 IPCC guidelines to the 2006 IPCC guidelines. And that was very beneficial for us in the sense that we started seeing what challenges are there and how to overcome challenges in terms of using the guidelines. We also submitted our first biennial update report in 2014, and with that we submitted a full NIR with covering the time series from the year 2000 to the year 2010. And we're also now fully hitting the 2006 IPCC guidelines. So that was really our first attempt at this biennial update reporting process, which we did. We were able to do that and submit on time. We went through the ICE process, both technical analysis as well as facilitation reviews. And I must say the very first technical analysis was a very, not easy process for us, but it was a very beneficial process for us, because through that process, we were able to see where the gaps are, what our capacity building needs are, and how to improve our reporting over time. What we really need to do to improve the reporting over time. Obviously, identifying the capacity building needs with the GTP, so that was a very good process. And one of the major lessons that came from that was we need to have systems in place, because when we did our first BUR, we really did it on an ad hoc basis. We did not have a system in place. In data was just collected on an ad hoc basis. There was no agreements, it was just agreements and things like that. So in other cases, we were not able to get the data on time, and sometimes, it was a very cumbersome process overall. So it showed that need to have a system in place. So that is when then took this robust approach to set up the National Monitoring and Evaluation System, and most of this work was funded through international donors. We also managed to set up the National Health Inventory Management System, which then required us to have with our instruments for data collection and formalize the collection process. I think how one system works has been well documented in our different reports. But in terms of some of the greatest benefits that came from that they would document the entire process of data collection as well as the process of inventory comparison. Because with our previous national communications, not even the reason why we decided to use 2000 as a basis is because we had previously recorded our national communications our emissions from 1994. But because that process was not documented, it was done by consultants, we did not have the data anymore. So when we started our 2000 inventory, establishing a system helped us to ensure that data is well archived and everything is well documented. And in terms of some of these things, we also did over time to improve our inventory. We established the National Greenhouse Gas Improvement Program, which is just a program that is aimed at improving the overall estimate of emissions. We do several studies, especially focusing on key categories to determine country-specific emission factors and activity data, and that way we can use higher methodologies to be able to estimate our emissions more accurately. We also have a mandatory greenhouse gas reporting program where the industry reports to the DERF on an annual basis their estimated emissions. So those are some of the measures that we have undertaken to improve our reporting. And over the years, since both our first BUR and second BUR have undergone the full ICA process, we were able to also receive different recommendations from the TTE, from the other parties, and the HSPs, which we took into consideration when we introduced certain improvements. And in terms of how to prepare for the enhanced how this is beneficial beneficial. I think there are many things that are required to enhance the framework and understand what a key process is. So, okay, I hear that I'm breaking. I apologize for that. I hope
you're breaking and you have just 1 minute.
Okay. So yeah, we have been using the 2006 IPCC guidelines, which has also, I think, been beneficial in terms of preparing us for the enhanced transparency framework. We have experienced reporting a consistent time series, which is there also as a provision in the guidelines, the enhanced transparency framework. We have some experience with tracking progress, our targets, and also doing some projections. So I think from our side as South Africa has been the context in terms of what we have learned from our framework, participating in the ICA in terms of how that will assist us to prepare for the AGM. Thank you, and I apologize for breaking in sound.
Oh. Yeah, thank you very much, Sandra, for sharing your experiences. I think an important element that you've raised is to do with the institutional arrangement, and possibly later you will, during the question and answer, you could elaborate a little bit on what lessons have you learned in terms of the framework, what makes sense, and also the needs assessment and trying to fill that gap of the capacity needs that you have, and coming up with a GHG program. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences. I'd like to quickly move to Juliet Mary-Edith. Juliet, the question that we have for you is, what are the essential elements of promoting and improving coherence and coordination of capacity building activities? And how can these elements be incorporated in supporting the enhanced transparency framework? Over to you, Juliet. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I see a nod. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to some of the speakers before. I think what you said has been incredibly valuable to me in my thinking, and I might pick up on a couple of elements that you've said. Just to start off by saying really quickly, I'm really pleased to join this conversation today. I think now is the perfect time to bring together the very important worlds of both capacity building and transparency and have a really good conversation about this challenge of capacity building for transparency. And I've heard lots of valuable reflections, but I'm really interested to hear even more from the rest of you, you know, from our important delivery partners, but also different countries, so that we can learn and reflect together. I think that's a really great question. And what I might do is just touch a little bit on the challenge in this area, picking up on some of the things that others have said, to then explain why promoting coherence and coordination is so important, and try and capture that. The way that I see it is that it's part of a whole system, and the enhanced transparency framework is a really important part of that. So I'll try and explain my thinking. So I guess, first of all, just to say that obviously capacity building is absolutely essential as we all start working towards this common goal of implementing the Paris Agreement. And as Marianne said at the beginning, the enhanced transparency framework really is a cornerstone of that, and that's to facilitate action for both mitigation, adaptation and support. And actually some of the stuff that Secretariat representatives and the CGE said, I thought was really interesting. You know, we know that all parties will be fulfilling new commitments under the enhanced transparency framework, but they're all parties coming from different starting points, and some are already taking great action under the current reporting, and we need to celebrate that success, and that is something that we will build on over time as we move into the enhanced transparency framework reporting. But we do really need to recognise that you know, for developing countries in particular, they will be reporting more regularly and to a much greater level of detail. And whilst there are flexibilities provided for in the transparency framework for those that need it in light of their capacities, undoubtedly there will be a lot more learning to be done and capacity to be built. And just to say, whilst there's, on the one hand, there's a lot of resources out there, there are a lot of channels of support, and that's excellent, and we can be drawing on them and building on them. But equally to say that there's more to be done, and the landscape is complex. It's complex because the capacity building landscape alone is complex with different providers, but capacity building itself is complicated. We've talked a lot in other capacity building forums together that there's no one size fits all approach. Capacity building needs to be country led. It needs to be done at the individual, the institutional and regional levels. And I know Cliff from the SIDS talked about the importance of universities, and there are multiple approaches needed in terms of capacity building. So that was just to explain a little bit that, therefore, enhancing the coherence and coordination of capacity building so that we can best answer this need in this complex environment will be really essential. What I would say is that I think coherence and coordination, the opportunity comes in a number of different levels, and I would put them into about 4 buckets. So just to start with, on the individual project level, I think there's something really important about ensuring that projects are demand-led and robust in their design and delivery. So that includes, and Cliff talked about this as well, making sure that donors are using in-country stakeholders and coordinating with local partners to make sure there is coherence in that respect. And then secondly, as there are various stakeholders of both donors, delivery partners, countries working together, they will need to coordinate themselves in different ways. And sometimes that's more loosely, and sometimes that's quite systematically. And I think ICAT, PAPA, CBIT are all really good examples of different ways to do that. And then, much like we heard last year, actually, at the Durban Forum, which I thought was a really great theme and brought out some important lessons, there's some importance about the coordination at a national level. And I think there were some really great examples that were provided there. And then just to say, there are a variety of ways under the Enhanced Transparency Framework, but also the UNFCCC as a whole, where we can improve coherence and coordination. And I might just drill down into that a little bit, given I think it's of particular interest to people here. I think it's, like I touched on, a whole system start to finish approach. So firstly, as parties are starting to undergo this process of preparing their national adaptation plans, their NDCs and their long-term strategies, this alone should build understanding of needs and therefore facilitate coherence and coordination. It's often a core part of what the technical assistance or capacity building support provides, and I think the NDC partnership and its partnership plans are really good examples of that. And then just to say, much like my colleagues at the Secretariat, but also the CGE, the importance of the process of reporting itself. We hear from parties that alone presents an opportunity to build capacity. But particularly important, I think it obviously provides this excellent framework to both identify through the international, identify and communicate clearly the capacity building support required, including for transparency. And I think it's already been touched on, but the international consultation and analysis process has been a really good example of that. And when we've spoken with countries and when we've heard them talk in the facilitative sharing of views process, they've talked about this dual approach where both the parties, but teams of technical experts in consultation with the parties, identify capacity building actions that could be helpful. And particularly we've heard that the non-intrusive, non-punitive nature that is respecting national sovereignty is something they found to be really effective. We've also seen a pattern where countries tend to improve on their reporting in response to those elements that are identified through that process, and in response to some of the things that they've learned as part of that experience. And we're really pleased that through the Enhanced Transparency Framework review process, the same sort of learning will continue to apply. We've also heard that parties have said that they felt that they built capacity through their experts undergoing training for the expert technical reviewers, and that will continue to happen. But just to bring it into the bigger picture, obviously once that process has happened and that reporting has happened about identifying capacity building needs, Obviously, there'll be a really important role for the CGE and other providers of support and the countries themselves to be responding and coordinating to be able to respond coherently to those elements that have been identified. I just wanted to touch on finally, when we're looking at, I guess, the UNFCCC a bit more broadly, there's another opportunity that I think really presents itself through the UNFCCC framework to encourage coherence and coordination in the terms of stakeholders meeting one another and responding to gaps, but also learning. And obviously the Durban Forum, and I'll be quick to try and wrap up, is a really great example, and that's why this conversation today is so excellent. But obviously, as Cliff mentioned, the PCCB, and Roberta will know, you know, it as a convening power, bringing people together with great information resources, it will be able to signpost needs, and it will be able to identify ways in which stakeholders can respond. And it's set up some excellent initiatives like the Capacity Building Hub and the PCCB network, and it started to do that in that way. And there are obviously a number of other fora that we have under the UNFCCC and other meetings where stakeholders can meet and naturally improve that coherence and coordination. So I just wanted to end to say I'm, you know, really excited that over the year we've got a lot of these opportunities to progress the conversation. And then, of course, at COP26, there's some really important decisions that we will be agreeing, and it's an opportunity to support all of this. So, of course, the reporting tables for the Enhanced Transparency Framework, the training programme for expert reviewers under the Paris Agreement, the terms of reference of the CGE, and the PCCB work plan. So I hope that explains our thinking, but just to say it's an important topic, and there are many opportunities to make progress, and I'm really, really looking forward to hearing more from everybody to learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. You've, I think, raised pertinent issues, particularly the systems approach to coherence and coordination, and looking at scale from the local national level to the international level, and looking at opportunities not just for training, but also exchange. So I think we'll go into deeper discussions during the question and answer session, because I can see we are a little bit running out of time. So I'd like to quickly then move on to Damiano. Damiano, please let us know, how can we benefit from South-South cooperation in this transition period? You know, what are the opportunities and what is it that we can do? And you have 5 minutes, and I'd like to please ask the panelists to keep to their 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Damiano, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the possibility. And let me thank UNFCCC for the opportunity of being here today. Regarding South-South cooperation, we at UNDP, we do think it's actually a very effective approach to enhance national capacities. Why? Because we do think, and we've seen with data, that it can accelerate exchange, adoption, and internalization of knowledge among stakeholders from developing countries in a more effective ways than some other forms of capacity building, such as for example, regional workshops. What we've seen in our work is that when talking to providers and beneficiaries of South-South support and transparency, when we talk to them, they have very valuable feedback, and they consider that this approach is useful to them, and they're actually eager to continue it, which I think it's a sign that we're going in the right direction. We at UNDP, we think regarding MRV and transparency, and based on our experience in providing support, that the South-South cooperation has 3 big added values. The first one, that it allows developing countries and developed countries as well to showcase and to present to others what has worked and what has not worked at the same time, in advancing with establishing MRV and transparency capacities, and in the direction of establishing a sound MRV system. By sharing this lesson learned, it allows other countries to save a significant amount of time and it allows countries to properly use the resources that they receive by Jeff in the implementation of their national communications and biennial update reports to quickly replicate these experiences that have already achieved results, that already work somewhere else and that can be replicated in a very effective and efficient way. A second added value is that in a way it creates a constructive spirit and desire to emulate what other peers have done. So in a way, if I see that my colleague from a neighboring country has already been able to, for example, implement a geo-inventory system, then it's a good incentive for me to try to replicate that. So if my neighbor did it, if my colleague whom I always meet has already done it, then I have an additional motivation to do it. And I think it's a healthy spirit to try to emulate and improve what others have already achieved. And third, a big added value of South cooperation, which is, in our view, very cost effective. And I will go into details later on. So maybe allow me to give a concrete example that UNDP has facilitated. And let me use the most recent example, which has been an exchange that UNDP has supported 3 months ago between the government of Colombia and the government of Cuba. This happened in the framework of one of our South-South network, which in this case is the Latin American network on greenhouse gas inventories, or as we call it in our jargon, Reading Hay. In this case, in the framework of this collaboration, experts working on inventory in Cuba realized that they had a big capacity need regarding the category 3B of the 2006 IPCC guidelines, which means on land and AFOLU issues. And in the discussions in the framework of the network, they saw that Colombia was very advanced on this topic. So by discussing with Colombia, we intervened to facilitate an exchange. First, we provided the opportunity for several experts from the entity in charge of the inventory in Cuba to travel to Bogota. There they were greeted by a very wide group of experts from IDEAM, which is the institute in Colombia in charge of the inventory, and there was 5 days of discussion, of exchanges, and we're actually planning on replicating this in La Habana once opportunities rise up again and there will be possibilities of traveling. This exchange, which is one of several we have provided, was also very cost effective, because at the end it was just allowing the opportunity for Cuban colleagues to travel to Bogota. There was no need to hire any additional experts. Costs in Bogota were actually covered by the Colombian government. So by spending $3,000-4,000, we created an opportunity for 5 days exchanges, which greatly benefited the Cuban colleagues. And if you have the opportunity to talk to them, they mentioned that this may have been more useful than, for example, hiring 1 or 2 international consultants and for them to come into La Habana. If you allow me to add on South cooperation, also noting that my time is running out, we have a big challenge.
Maybe you could do that during the opening, unless you just have a minute to give us quickly that example. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a big challenge. We have a big challenge because we see that BUR submissions number, we should orientate assistance in moving to the enhanced transparency framework are still very low. As of today, we only had the 57 countries that have submitted the BUR. This year, we only had 2 submissions of BUR, Dominican Republic and Antigua and Barbuda. So numbers are still very low, which means we have big challenges in moving forward. So how does UNDP deal with this challenge? We have UNDP's views is that the provision on support on climate action on MRV needs to be based on 3 pillars. First pillar is more targeted support based on country needs, and in this sense, the information provided by ICA is extremely valuable. The second point is indeed South-South cooperation, encouraging and facilitating countries to collaborate among them and to exchange views and exchange knowledge. And our third pillar is to push and encourage countries to integrate gender equity consideration into climate actions. And we do think that NCs and PUR are great opportunities for countries to start investing efforts on this, to start, for example, collecting data and to report in their NCs, PUR, and hopefully in the BTRs on new gender-related climate indicators, on how the two, let's call community, the climate community and the gender community inside the country talk to each other and how we jointly advance. We have interesting experiences, but my time is running out, so thank you very much, and back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Damiano, for the rich experiences that you've shared, especially with the South-South cooperation and how it allows one to pick, best case example and to make it cost effective, and the importance of identifying needs and being able to respond to those needs, drawing on experiences from others who've been able to do it effectively. And for the practical example that you shared of the two countries, thank you very much. I'd like to go to our last panelist, last but not least, Fabian. So Fabian, what are the major lessons learned from the MRV process now, including the international consultative and analysis process that could benefit from the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework, that could benefit the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework? Over to you, Fabian. And you could build on what Sandra had shared as well, because she talked about the experiences in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good day to all colleagues around the world. Thank you, first of all, to our organizers of today's Durban Forum for inviting us to share our experience. Maybe to start, briefly introducing myself, I'm the component manager for transparency and German Development Cooperation's project on supporting the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And within the project, we host the Secretariat for the Partnership on Transparency in the Paris Agreement. And today I would like to speak on behalf of the Secretariat. So maybe to start, before going into your question, I would like to briefly introduce the partnership, or PATPA as we call it. So the Partnership on Transparency in the Paris Agreement was actually founded as the Partnership on Mitigation MRV in the year 2010 by South Africa, South Korea, and Germany at the Petersburg Climate Dialogue. It is a semi-formal initiative, and the work of PATPA. The second pillar forms around 5 regional or language groups, which are composed within the PATPA, and which are targeting capacity building and also networking among mainly practitioners. So we have a Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone group, and also an Asian and a Latin American group. The third pillar are small-scale, short-term in-country support through our so-called ad hoc facility for transparency in the climate help desk. And here, for example, we just currently support Nepal in reviewing its greenhouse gas inventories and the availability and quality of data. And due to Corona, we do that remotely, and it really works great. And turning to the fourth pillar, this is the development of knowledge products and also the dissemination of international best practices to address countries' needs. For example, looking at the BTRs, we currently develop a BTR process guidance and roadmap tool that will help countries to actually build their roadmap and their plan towards the BTRs. And all these products can be found on our partnership website. Today, more than 100 countries participate in the partnership's activities and events. And speaking to the issue of coordination and cooperation with others, we are really glad that we are very successfully coordinating and cooperating with different international actors, but also count with important financial contributions from countries. So now turning to your question on lessons learned, especially from the MRV, I will try to maybe not repeat so much what has been said, but maybe add a couple of other perspectives. So the first issue I would like to raise, or the first big lesson learned, is that we really need to focus on explaining the national benefits of solid MRV and transparency systems to better achieve the necessary political buy-in on national level. So we see that the focus currently of many countries is really on action around mitigation and adaptation, and transparency is not often not the priority, and sometimes it may be even viewed as a mere burdensome obligation to fulfill international requirements. And that is quite sad, because when this transparency is not giving the necessary priority, countries will not attribute the resources, the financial and human resources that we need on the national level to actually achieve transparency. So our task is really to explain these benefits that a country can obtain through a solid and ambitious climate reporting and robust and self-sustained MRV system. And obviously, for us in the, let's say, transparency bubble, these benefits obviously go beyond fulfilling current and future reporting requirements, but really they are reliable national statistics are the point of departure for targeted NDCs, for evidence-based policy decisions, but also, for example, for obtaining international financial support. Turning to my second point, I would like to point out that one lesson learned for us was that in the case where it is needed, we really need to address basics first. So we see that today almost 100 countries have not submitted their first BURs, and we know that the submission of BURs is basically the best practice they can have to prepare for the enhanced transparency framework. At the same time, one should not jump to the conclusion that now we have to support countries to start with the BURs, but we really should look whether the basic requirements to start implementing the MRV and the transparency framework are in place. And that is why any capacity development activity needs to target these basics first. So that is one reason why, for example, in the framework of our regional workshops and also in countries of support from PATBA, we're supporting issues around data collection, setting up national statistics, but also management of long-term institutional arrangements. So some countries tend to only set up ad hoc institutional arrangements, which basically dissolve after conclusion of processes. But the thing is that these institutional arrangements really need to be long-term, and both the data and the institutional arrangements need to be in place to start to develop the BUR. And maybe turning to a last point, and this also refers to what Clifford mentioned earlier on the availability of resources, is that we really need to recognize language barriers. So we seen in our work that countries really report on challenges because of language barriers. And these language barriers really impede the effective capacity building, as well as in some cases South-South cooperation and the building of networks. So we really need to recognize language barriers, and we as the PATBA, we try to counteract with the 5 regional groups which are clustered where possible, also around language, and we hope to thus bridge a bit the gap between the countries. So with that, I would like to leave it at that, and thank you, and I really look forward to the ensuing discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Fabian. You've added a new element to the previous interventions, particularly bringing in the issue of the institutional arrangement in terms of looking at the long-term institutional arrangement that would ensure you've got the right data and information that allows this process to go on. I think a question that I will want to ask the panelists, which you can pick at the point when we are opening up shortly to questions from the audience, is the issue of integrating the MRV systems with some of the national frameworks, whether it's a national development plan, whether it's the SDG, so that you actually have more of an integration into the processes. So with that, I would like to turn over to the audience. I would like to pick probably just 5 questions, given the time constraints that we have. If there are any questions to the panelists, is to ask for just 5 questions. Alejandro, I'd like to turn over to you and just read to us 5 questions, indicating to which panelists. And if there's no panelist identified, then we will get one of the panelists to respond. So over to you, Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Edith. I hope you can hear me well. Yes, thankfully, and it's very encouraging to see we got many questions through the Mentimeter, but as you mentioned, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to cover all of them. So we have, as you have indicated, selected 5 questions for the panelists, very specific questions addressed to each of the panelists. For you to consider. So the first one is directed at Clifford, and the question is, what are the key challenges faced by SIDS to implement the enhanced transparency framework? Then there's another question directed to Damiano, and it's related about what are the plans to start providing financial support to parties to start working on the first PTR. Then there's a question directed to Sandra about the experience in South Africa in terms of what was the role of international capacity building support in improving South Africa's transparency system, and how important or crucial was this support for the entire transparency process in South Africa. Then we have a question to Juliet, making reference to what you mentioned, Juliet, about the importance of initiatives such as ICAT and CBIT, but noting that both of these are time limited and the resources for CBIT are already exhausted. And the specific question is, how do you see the role of those initiatives going forward? Should they be prolonged? And there were also general remarks on what could be the best practices in improving in-country cooperation. So those are the questions that we have for our panelists. Thank you, and over to you. Back to you, Edith.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we will take the questions in the order that they have come, and I will start with Clifford. I believe you took down your question. If you didn't, just let us know. Over to you, Clifford. And please just take a minute and include your final take-home messages as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. And thanks very much for the question. And the question is, if I may, the key challenges that are faced by SIDS to implement the transparency framework. The challenges haven't changed. They are the ones that SIDS have been facing since they have been needed to do the reporting. The first one is certainly available expertise within the countries, and I already laid out a way that in my first presentation and how we could look at addressing that. But data, for any assessment, the data is the critical element. How good that data is, or comprehensive it is, or accurate it is, they determine what are the outcomes, what are the decisions that you will make from that. So data is a key challenge. Collecting that data, and it's really climate data in this case, but also other type of data, socioeconomic data, demographics, etc. But the climate data is a critical one. Collecting, archiving, and this means building up your MET and your hydrological services. In many instances, this is not fully developed in all of the countries. It is in some, and in many instances, we have to use a regional approach in order to overcome some of the barriers and the difficulties. Scenarios, climate scenarios is a very critical element and tool as we do assessments. But for small islands, the resolution of the climate models that are being used are still not at a sufficient level. And we know the difficulties there are in that, but this is something we have to keep coming back to and looking at, because if we can bring that resolution down to 3 kilometers, then it will mean a whole lot of difference with respect to the islands. But in addition to that, even for the larger countries, the final resolution provides that much more accuracy and enable you to do a lot more in respect to the information that you're actually outputting. Then impact models, many impact models exist. but most are not suitable for small islands, small island states. And so how to downsize, extrapolate, and to bring them down to where they are useful for small island states is quite important. But we have been through regional Caribbean as the regional climate change center, the Pacific has one, in script, and the other areas have regional, and even not within SIS, but other developing countries, there's a lot of things happening with respect at the regional level, and so we have to really promote that and enhance it. So my final takeout is that if this is a timely, COVID has given us a lot of positives, a lot of negatives, but yeah, without COVID, maybe we wouldn't be having this. But we have it now where we have a lot of number of participants, and I just re-emphasizing that capacity building, the last major issue to really get the needed support is one that we have to keep building on, and hopefully we can see a permanent constituted body for this capacity building element. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to hand over to Damiano. Just please take a minute in responding. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much, Chair. It's a very appropriate question because we really need to think on how we move to the BTRs. As mentioned before, we have 57 countries that have submitted a BUR, which means that we still have almost 100 developing countries that have still to elaborate its first BUR. And the first BUR was supposed to be submitted 6 years ago. So we need to consider that we cannot wait to start implementing BTRs 2 years before the deadline, because that would cause a very high risk of having a very limited number of submissions by December 2024. So it's UNDP's view, which I think is shared by several other stakeholders, that we should start the BTR process as soon as possible. So while it is true that there are still some limited elements under negotiation, I think there's a shared understanding that those negotiations do not impede to start advancing in providing opportunities for countries to access BTR resources. The issue is now being managed by colleagues at the JET Secretariat. They're starting some informal discussion with several of us, providing support, and this discussion, I understand, will be starting next week. So I do hope, and this is my expectation, that by end of the Northern Hemisphere summer, we can have BTR guidelines approved, and that means that my suggestion would be starting at the end of this year, any country that submits the BUR to consider to immediately move to the BTR. This will allow us 3-4 years to elaborate the BTR. If we're able to submit the BTR before 2024, I think it's wonderful. If not, we will still have more time, 3-4 years, to adapt to the circumstances. So BTR is key, and I think it should be considered as a priority for all of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So quickly, I'll go to Sandra to respond to the question that was directed at you.
Sandra, if you could speak closer to the microphone, because your last intervention was a bit problematic to follow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks for that. And yeah, so in terms of the international capacity building support that has been received by South Africa and what its role has been, I think South Africa, like many developing countries, has received a lot of international support on capacity building. There are like many various organizations, including the CGE. We also have a partner where South Africa is also a partner itself that also offers capacity building. There's also been the different regional MRV networks through the global support program that is led by both the UNEP and the UNDP. I think overall there are many various organizations that provide capacity building support. And for South Africa, this has been beneficial in terms of training the experts that we have. In the beginning, we did have some experts, but many of them, especially in the field of the greenhouse gas inventory, have benefited from the different trainings that have been provided in the area of capacity building in terms of enhancing their expertise on compilation of greenhouse gas inventory. To this date, as South Africa, we developed our greenhouse gas inventory internally. We do not use any consultants when we do that. And part of this achievement can be attributed to the different capacity building support programs that are there internationally. So these are some of the things that we have benefited from. In addition, as South Africa, we have the CBIT project, and we use the UNEP as the implementing agent job. So in our CBIT project, we have various tools that are aimed at improving our capacity building further than what we already have. I mean, one of the tools is to fully operationalize the monitoring and evaluation system. I did speak about our monitoring and evaluation system. It is operational. Of course, it still has some gaps and subject to improvement as we go along. So those are some of the areas we are focusing on with regards to our CBIT project. And we also have a component that focuses on training various aspects in the country, greenhouse gas inventory compilation, as well as assessment of the impact of the mitigation actions. We want to do this because we want to make sure that the different data providers understand the kind of data that they need to provide to the department as the coordinating entity as we prepare ourselves for the enhanced transparency framework. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now go to Juliet. Juliet, you have a minute to respond to the question directed at you. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. And I think it was two questions sort of wrapped up in one, so I'll do my best to answer them both. But looking first at that first question about continuation or long-term availability of support, and particularly talking about ICAT and CBIT, I think from the main message from me would be that there are a number of support providers out there, and actually this is why the enhanced transparency framework and the reporting on needs is so important, because it will continue to guide the work of the different providers out there and enable donors and others to come forward to be able to continue to provide support in the long term. And that support will inherently change over time as parties' needs change over time. But obviously in terms of CBIT, it's now a slightly different entity after it transitioned under the GEF, and it's obviously in the GEF 7 phase now, lasting till 2022, and currently delivering a number of different projects. But obviously ahead of us, we will have the financial mechanism review and then subsequently GEF replenishment. So the plan would be that it would be responding to that. So obviously the demand-led element, and I know that ICAT has recently started working with a number of other countries, and depending on what happens to every entity, we hope that the strong sort of long-term signals of support needed will continue to make sure that the support that's needed is affected and delivered to the right places. And then moving on quickly to the second question, which was a bit about how you ensure that best practice capacity building in country, and all I can do is offer the UK experience, and that's something that we have been continually trying to learn and build on about best practice. And I guess a few key principles that we're trying to be guided by are relevant to draw on, and that's demand-led, like I mentioned before, but it's also working in country, and I think I mentioned that previously. But we've noticed the importance of an emphasis on partnerships, and that can come in many different types of ways. That could be long-term bilateral partnerships or groups of partnerships of donors, delivery partners, and countries working together. And then just finally, quickly, what I would say was also very important that we found best practice and the effectiveness of capacity building is the importance of monitoring and evaluation. And again, that's something we've really tried to build on over recent years. And I'd say 2 points are relevant here. We've really tried to improve what we call the KPIs, the key performance indicators, to make sure that we're measuring support that's really transformational, but also long-term. But also, and particularly important for capacity building, that monitoring and evaluation can be quick and responsive as a project continues to be delivered, so that as needs change or country circumstances change, that support and capacity building can be adapted to be as effective as possible. So I hope that's some useful sort of thinking from our experience in terms of how you really improve that best practice in-country cooperation approach. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And we come to an end of the panel discussion. I'd like you to join me to really thank the panelists for an excellent session and very insightful discussions. Thank you very much. We can give them a virtual applause. So allow me now to quickly move to the next session. We are now moving into the breakout discussion. And in the breakout discussion, we will break into 4 smaller group discussions. Each group will be addressing a subtopic, and this will take, given that we've run out of time, we will reduce that to 35 minutes. So we should be back in about half an hour. So we'll start with the first group. Before I go into the first group, let me give the instructions. In the breakout rooms, you have a link that takes you to your respective breakout group. You should have received that. If not, you can get that from the chat box. Within your groups, you can lift up your hands, use the hands up gesture, or type into the chat for that particular group, or you can write your comments in the Mentimeter. So I will start with breakout group 1. Breakout group 1 is led by Damiano, representative of the consultative group of experts. And this particular group will touch on this subtopic. Are we ready for the BTR? What are the implications? Relevant MPGs adopted in Katowice for developing countries in terms of building or strengthening capacity and looking at needs and gaps. So that is group number 1, led by Damiano. The specific questions for that group are already posted online, so that can be obtained online. The second group is led by Henning Vester. He's representative of Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. This group will be addressing the subtopic lessons learned in relation to both action taken and support received in developing countries as regards capacity building for MRV that could be useful in implementing the enhanced transparency framework. Group number 3 will be led by Chisa Umemia. Chisa is the representative of the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and this group will touch on the subtopic assessing and improving the effectiveness of capacity building action. The last but not least is group number 4, which will be led by Yamide Dagnet, representative of the World Resource Institute. Group 4 will focus on promoting and improving coherence and coordination of capacity building action at the national and international level to enhance support for implementing the enhanced transparency framework. So thank you very much, and enjoy the discussions in your respective groups. We will see you back in about half an hour. Thank you.